All right, strap in, everybody. Let's take a deep dive into a case that's going to make you question everything.
Ooh, sounds juicy.
Today, we're looking at Pam Hupp.
Oh, Pam Hupp.
This woman, she's at the center of not one, not two, but three suspicious deaths.
Wow. 3.
Yep, so get ready for a wild ride because this one is packed with twists and turns.
All right, I'm ready. Lay it on me.
So we've been digging through articles, court documents, even excerpts from Bone Deep.
Oh, yeah, the book by Russ Faria's lawyer.
Exactly, so it's going to be a lot to untangle.
You think we can do it?
We'll try. Together, we're going to see if we can sift through fact and fiction and figure out once and for all.
If Pam Hupp is mastermind or just incredibly lucky.
Right, criminal mastermind. Or just the luckiest person alive.
That's the question. What I think is so fascinating about this whole thing is how this case plays with our perceptions.
I know, right?
Like, is she this cunning manipulator or is there something else going on? It's hard to tell.
Yeah, it's like it makes you think.
It really does. Maybe we should start with the most tragic part of this whole story.
Right, yeah.
The murder of Betsy Faria back in 2011.
Yeah.
She was found tragically stabbed to death in her Missouri home.
Horrible way to go.
And of course, immediately, her husband, Russ, he became the prime suspect.
You can just imagine the chaos of that whole scene, right?
Totally.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
Russ, he had an alibi.
No kidding.
Yeah. And it was corroborated by 4 witnesses.
Wow.
4.
Wow.
But the police, they zeroed in on him anyway.
Why?
They fixated on his emotional state after Betsy's death.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, they pointed to his financial problems.
So they're painting him as a desperate husband driven to murder.
Right, for that sweet, sweet life insurance money.
Ah, the classic tale.
Right, but this is where Pam Hupp, our girl Pam, enters the story.
Oh, here she comes.
She was Betsy's friend and the last person to actually see Betsy alive.
Interesting.
And get this, just days before the murder.
Okay, I'm listening.
Betsy changed the beneficiary of her $150,000 life insurance policy from her husband to, drumroll please,
Don't tell me, Pam.
Pam Hupp.
Wow, talk about a coincidence.
That's a big coincidence.
huge.
Or
But
isn't
it's
it?
something more calculated?
Especially when we consider, some of Pam's past.
Oh, like what?
Well, remember that incident at State Farm where she forged a letter?
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
And on top of that, she's got a history of money troubles
So maybe Pam has a bit of a habit of bending the rules.
when it benefits her.
Especially when it benefits her.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, and remember, she also used Betsy's photo without permission for a fundraiser.
Right, so you got to wonder, what were Pam's real intentions?
Was she actually a true friend to Betsy?
Or someone with a much darker plan?
Yeah, that's the big question.
So here we are, we got a suspicious life insurance switch.
Yeah.
Some shady behavior from Pam.
But the police were laser focused on Russ.
Right, so what went down at that first trial?
Well, despite a lack of physical evidence directly tying him to the crime.
And a solid alibi.
And that rock-solid alibi, the jury still found Russ guilty.
Oh, no.
Yep, sentenced to life in prison without parole.
It's crazy, right? I mean, it took years for everyone to see what was right there in front of them.
Years.
But thank goodness Russ had a good lawyer.
Bill Schwartz.
Yeah, a real bulldog. Fought like crazy for a retrial.
He was convinced the police had missed some huge clues.
And that those clues pointed right at Pam.
And you know what? He was right.
He was totally right. At the retrial, they were able to bring in new evidence that totally challenged Pam's credibility. Turns out, she had changed her story about the day of the murder multiple times.
Oh, really?
Multiple.
So she's already looking kind of suspicious here.
She's looking more than suspicious.
What else did she do?
She even claimed to be in a romantic relationship with Betsy.
Oh, come on.
Talk about money in the waters.
Classic deflection tactic, you know?
Yeah.
Throw in a shocking new detail, distract from the holes in your original story.
Genius? Almost worked. Almost. But there's one piece of evidence they couldn't ignore.
What's that?
That life insurance policy.
Oh, yes, the $150,000 motive?
You can't ignore that. And then there's how Pam inserted herself into everything.
Oh, how so?
Like insisting on driving Betsy home from chemo that night.
Even though Betsy had a ride.
Yeah, she already had it all arranged.
So Pam basically volunteered.
Yeah, and it seems very calculated, don't you think?
I mean, it's not looking good for her, especially with everything else we know.
Right.
And don't forget, Pam was the one who pointed the finger at Russ in the first place.
Oh, that's right.
Saying he was violent and threatening Betsy.
She was shaping the narrative from day one.
He's like, was this all part of a bigger plan?
So after all of that, What happened at the retrial?
Was justice served? You
Well,
gotta wait for part 2.
that's right. We've run out of time for today, but come back next week, and we'll see what the jury had to say about all this.
All right, so where were we?
We left off with Russ Faria's retrial, right?
Right. The jury's about to come back with a verdict.
Everyone's on the edge of their seats. After hearing all the evidence, the jury deliberated for only 2 hours.
2 hours? That's pretty quick.
Yeah, and they acquitted Russ of all charges.
Wow, talk about a vindication.
It was a huge victory for justice. The judge even went on to criticize the initial investigation, saying they'd focused way too much on Russ and missed some pretty crucial details.
Yeah, like a certain life insurance policy.
Exactly. It's a relief that Russ was finally exonerated. But this is where the story takes a really dark turn. Just a few years later, Pam Hupp is involved in another death.
Oh, no.
This time, a man named Louis Gumpenberger.
Okay, this is where things get even crazier. Pam claimed that Louis, who had disabilities, by the way, attacked her.
Wait, really?
Yeah, and she said he demanded she drive him to the bank.
To get Russ's money.
Right, Russ's money. She even staged a 911 call. It's like she was trying to create this whole elaborate revenge plot, framing Russ for a crime he didn't commit.
Hold on. Even after he was acquitted.
Even after? It's wild.
This is like, if this were a movie, people would be screaming at the screen, she's the killer.
I know.
Look at the insurance policy. But this is real life.
Real life with very real consequences. So what was Pam's motive in all this?
Why go to these lengths?
Well, the prosecution believed she was trying desperately to deflect suspicion from herself.
For Betsy's murder.
Exactly. By framing Russ for another violent crime, she was trying to reinforce the idea that he was this dangerous person.
Capable of murder.
Exactly.
So it's like a double whammy.
Uh.
She benefits financially from Betsy's death.
Uh-huh.
And then she tries to make sure she never gets caught.
By framing the one person who could expose her.
Wow.
It's a classic smokescreen, trying to make herself look like the victim. And this wasn't even the first time she played the victim card. Remember that whole incident at State Farm? She claimed someone was harassing her.
Oh, yeah, and she even forged a letter.
To make herself look more believable.
It's a pattern of behavior. Every time she's in a tough spot, she's the victim. And this time, it cost Louis Gumpenberger his life.
A tragic loss. But this time, the authorities saw right through her lies.
Thank goodness. Did she face any consequences for Louis' death?
She did. She was charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. Faced with all that evidence, Pam pled guilty.
To avoid the death penalty.
You got it. She's currently serving a life sentence, no parole.
So, some justice was served.
In the end.
But it's bittersweet, right? It took another innocent life to expose Pam.
It's a harsh reminder that the pursuit of justice isn't always easy. And it's not always pretty.
It's a long road, for sure. But in this case, the truth finally came out. Okay, so Pam's behind bars for Louis' murder. But what about Betsy Faria? Did the investigation into her death just end there, with Russ being acquitted?
Well, not exactly. Russ actually filed a civil lawsuit.
Against who?
Lincoln County, for his wrongful conviction. And get this, they ended up settling for over $2 million.
Wow. That's a pretty big admission of guilt.
You don't pay out that kind of money unless you know you messed up big time. And that settlement, it kind of opened the door for a closer look at Pam and her possible role in Betsy's death.
I can see that. So years after Russ is cleared, the Lincoln County prosecutor finally charges Pam Hupp with Betsy Faria's murder.
Finally. He even admitted publicly that the original investigation was botched, saying the case was basically driven by ego, more focused on an agenda than the truth.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. And it was clear that they believed Pam's motive was simple. Money.
That $150,000 life insurance payout.
Yep, a classic tale of greed and deception. Pam saw a way to take advantage of a friend and get away with murder, and for a while she almost pulled it off.
Wow. So what's the latest with those charges?
Well, the case is still ongoing. There have been a lot of delays.
Legal complications.
But the trial is supposed to happen later this year.
That'll be interesting to follow. There's one more piece to this puzzle, though.
Oh, yeah.
Pam's mother, Shirley Newman.
Right.
Why is her death considered suspicious?
Well, Shirley died in 2013, not long after Betsy. She fell from her third-floor apartment balcony, and they found high levels of sleeping pills in her system.
So initially they ruled it an accident.
Uh-huh. But knowing Pam's history, it's definitely a bit suspicious. And it fits a pattern, right? People close to Pam dying and her benefiting somehow.
Totally. Didn't Pam receive another life insurance payout after her mother's death?
She did, and just like with Betsy, she was the last person to see her mother alive, so it's all very convenient for Pam.
She's got terrible luck, I guess.
Yeah.
Or is it something more sinister?
That's the question, isn't it? Now, there's no direct proof connecting Pam to her mother's death.
Okay.
But the circumstances are questionable, let's say. And after Pam was convicted of Louis' murder, the police reopened the investigation into Shirley's death.
It's a shame that we may never know the full truth about what happened to Shirley. But even if Pam's never charged, the doubt will always be there.
Absolutely. It adds another layer of intrigue to this already complicated story. Makes you wonder if there's even more to uncover about Pam Hupp.
This whole case has been a roller coaster.
Yeah.
It's like every time you think you've got a handle on things, there's another twist.
You're right. It's a case that really makes you think about the nature of truth and deception. And it shows us a darker side of human nature, the potential for greed, manipulation, and violence hidden beneath an everyday appearance.
It makes you really think twice about who you trust and what their motives might be.
Exactly. And this case highlights how important critical thinking is, questioning what we're told, and seeking out the truth, even when it's uncomfortable.
So before we wrap up, let's zoom out for a minute.
Okay.
What does this story tell us about the criminal justice system as a whole?
Well, it really exposes the flaws in the system, how easily an innocent person can be convicted, especially when someone like Pam Hupp is pulling the strings.
It's scary to think about. Even the authorities can be tricked.
They're human too, after all.
This case really underscores the importance of a thorough investigation and the idea that someone's innocent until proven guilty.
And of course, due process is all crucial. But this case also shows the power of persistence.
Right.
Look at Russ Faria and his lawyer.
Joel Schwartz.
Right.
Yeah.
Without their determination, Pam might have gotten away with everything.
It's encouraging, in a way. Even facing huge obstacles, the fight for justice is worth it.
Absolutely.
It's just wild to think how one person, just one person, can impact so many lives. Like, what makes someone do the things Pam Hupp did? What makes them tick?
Yeah, that's a question that's been around forever, right? What creates a criminal mind? Like, is it nature, nurture, or a bit of both?
Right. Is it something you're born with? Or does life make you that way?
Exactly. And with Pam, it's tough to say for sure.
But looking back, you do see those patterns in her life.
Like what?
The constant manipulation.
Yeah, the lying.
Always wanting more money. It's like all these puzzle pieces. And they fit together, but the picture they make is just disturbing.
Right, it's a messed up puzzle. And it's a puzzle that people are still fascinated by today. Look at all the true crime podcasts, documentaries.
Oh, yeah.
Like the thing about Pam, that miniseries, people eat this stuff up.
It's like, I think it's because these cases force us to look at the dark side of humanity, you know?
Makes you question everything.
It makes you question your own judgments. Like, can you really tell who's good and who's bad? It reminds us that even someone who seems totally normal can be capable of doing awful things.
Yeah. I think people also want to understand the why, you know? What makes someone kill? Is it cold and calculated, or are they just snapping? With Pam, it seems like both.
It really does. It's chilling to think about how much planning went into it.
Yeah.
Especially with Louis Gumpenberger.
The staging, the fake evidence.
Trying to pin it all on Russ again. It's like something you'd see in a movie. It's crazy.
It really shows how cunning she was and how little she cared about anyone else's life. And the fact she fooled everyone for so long. That's the scariest part.
It makes you wonder how many other Pam Hupps are out there, right under our noses. Maybe they're manipulating people right now and getting away with it.
Ugh, that's a scary thought. But I think this case also teaches us that we can't just sit back and assume things.
Right, like assume the police will always catch the bad guy.
We got to be aware of the red flags, those signs of manipulation. Trust your gut. Speak up if something feels off, because you never know.
We can't just assume justice will always win either. Sometimes it takes everyday people like Russ and lawyers like his to push for the truth.
And even then, there's no guarantee. We may never know for sure what happened to Shirley Neumann.
Or if Pam will ever face charges for what she did to Betsy.
The questions will always linger, but one thing's for certain. What Pam did, it'll always cast a shadow over this whole case and everyone involved.
Well, we've covered a lot today. It's been a fascinating and, yeah, pretty disturbing look into the mind of a woman who caused a lot of pain.
It's a story that shows just how complicated people are and how even our justice system can get things wrong. But it also reminds us how important it is to keep searching for the truth no matter what.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the strange case of Pam Hupp. We hope this has given you something to think about, maybe keep you up at night, who knows.
And hey, just remember, sometimes the most ordinary-looking people, they can have the darkest secrets. So be careful out there, stay informed, and always question what you see and hear.
That's good advice. Until next time, folks.